Well, hello, happy Thursday. Welcome back to the Hockey Writers Live. After a week off, we are back. Really appreciate you taking some of your time to join us here on Thursday, April 22nd. I'm your host, Mark Scheig. And you know what? Yesterday was 3 months to the day of the Seattle expansion draft, if you could believe that. So I thought this would be a perfect time to bring on someone who's very close to Seattle and someone who used to be here with the Hockey Writers. So I thought this would be really perfect. Andy Eide is joining us. Hello, Andy. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate you taking the time. I guess just first and foremost, how are you doing?
Doing pretty good. Can't complain. The weather's turned nice here in Seattle. Believe it or not, it doesn't always rain, so we're excited about that.
And I get to wake up this morning here in Erie with 3 inches of snow on the ground. Welcome to April.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful.
Sounds very much like Erie. And then it's supposed to be back into the 60s again. It never likes to make up its mind. So Andy, I know you're in a situation out in Seattle where the WHL is back underway again. Just kind of tell everybody just what that was like waiting for a return to play out there, and then how's that going?
Well, the Western Hockey League, like all the junior leagues, what was delayed, right? And then all along we kept hearing we have a target date, then it got pushed back. We have another target date, it got pushed back, and so you did start to wonder if this was ever going to happen. And then we heard probably early February-ish that they had a plan for a 24-game season. They got approval from all the different various health authorities that they have to get them from, and they're dealing with 5 separate health authorities, which could be a little troublesome. They're not just dealing with one government. And so they had to deal with 5 or 6, I guess, if you count Oregon, which they also had to work with. So the state of Washington came through for the 5 teams in the U.S. division. So, and said that they have approval. So they've been 24-game seasons. We're 14 games in for Seattle here. They're all playing within divisions. So there's no across the border travel. You get to see the same teams over and over, and that it's been hockey. The players are all excited to be back. There's no fans, obviously, in the building where the Seattle Thunderbirds play, where I go a lot. The building there, the Shower Center in Kent, Washington, is being used as a vaccination site. So you have this strange juxtaposition of people waiting in the stands after they get their shots for 15 minutes while the team's practicing or even like warming up for a game. So it's been very interesting. Watching hockey without fans is a new thing. It feels like scrimmages sometimes, or even like a preseason game where there's not very many fans. So it's been definite a different experience.
Boy, I'll say, and now obviously with the news that just came out with the OHL not even having a season, that's got to be a bit of an advantage for some of the kids out in the dub that get to play in a few games. I mean, is there a scouting presence out there that you've noticed so far?
Yeah, the Thunderbirds have had about anywhere between 12 to 15 scouts, NHL scouts at each game, and that's down from what it normally would be. It normally would be, some depending on who of the other team and how many prospects there are, but they've had up to 40 at one point when they had a lot of prospects on the ice. I talked to one scout who normally scouts the U.S. division here, but he's based out of Canada, and his team had to send somebody else, a U.S.-based scout, because he can't get across the border fast enough without all the quarantining and stuff for him to just go check out games. So it definitely has had an impact on scouting. It's going to be interesting to see how this draft goes with the limited viewings, but that's the reason WHL is playing this year, is they want those guys to not only get development, that they don't want to lose that even 24 games of development, but they want their NHL drafted or eligible guys to be seen.
And I can only imagine that that's what a lot of the other kids, especially in the OHL, that's what they wanted too. And it'll be curious to see now, will they get an opportunity to have some kind of an event, like whether it be combine style or anything like that? Can't wait to see how it goes. Now, we're obviously talking about the draft as well. Well, we have the expansion draft in July, and then a couple days after that, there was talk at one point in time maybe Seattle would actually host that. I'm not sure in this environment, but it looks like it's still going to be virtual. Is that your understanding?
That's my understanding. Yeah, I don't believe Seattle will be hosting it. That was way back when, like a year ago or so, before the pandemic. That was kind of the swirling rumor. And at this point, I don't even know that the arena will be quite finished in July. I think they're definitely on target for October, but it might not quite be completely finished. It'll be close, but so it wouldn't probably make sense anyways. But yeah, I believe it'll be virtual again this year.
Absolutely. So I guess just for you, from the time the pandemic started until now, you have some games to look forward to. what was life actually like for you in your position, knowing that for a while there was no hockey?
Yeah, well, I'm fortunate too because I've also been, covering this Kraken story. So
Yeah.
there were stories to write there, even though there's no games. But that didn't really impact what the Kraken have been doing too much, other than they're all remote for the most part. I don't even know that Ron Francis, the GM, has moved here yet.
Yeah. Wow.
So I mean, but as far as like covering that story, it was
Mhm.
it wasn't too different, other than we really couldn't ramp up any kind of expansion talk until the NHL got going again.
Yep.
On the junior front, there really wasn't much to talk about. I mean, it feels like all the stories I wrote were about delays in the WHL start. So that was a lot different. But we were
Mhm.
able to find some stories to cover, and and talk about a lot of speculation about what could happen. Or the Kraken have been very good about access, so I've been able to talk to Ron Francis and Ricky
Mm.
Olczyk, the AGM, and a lot of the guys that are in the organization. So there's been stuff to write about and cover. It'll be more fun stuff though coming up here in a couple months, so we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, definitely. We're getting ramped up here. I know from a Seattle standpoint, they've had scouts out and about, especially in Columbus. Actually, Jason Botterill's had multiple stops in Columbus this
Mhm.
year. Just yeah, it's exciting that we're finally starting to kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel here, where that 32nd team is going to get in. And Andy, can you feel a buzz in the city yet? I mean, are we to the point where the city's starting to realize that it's getting close to real for this team to, start getting going here?
Oh yeah, definitely. If you walk around town, you'll see Kraken gear, and
Mhm.
the name release and the logo, that was a big hit. That happened during the pandemic as well, back in July, where they announced the name. And ever since then, they've been merchandise has been flying off the shelves, and there's not even a jersey to buy yet. That won't come for a little bit now still, but I think definitely there's a lot of excitement. And it's a new NHL market. There are hockey fans here with the heavy major junior presence.
Mhm.
But there's some excitement just from people who maybe weren't hockey fans and now are getting into it. Like they're really into it. But yeah, if you talk to people who maybe haven't been fans, I think just the newness of it has been exciting as well.
Absolutely. Andy Eide joining us. He covers the Seattle Kraken for NHL.com and also in the WHL with the Seattle Thunderbirds. You can hear him on 710 ESPN radio out there in Seattle. So, what about a time frame for a head coach? I mean, we're talking just 3 months before the expansion draft. Is there anything you're hearing about any possible names or any possible time frame as to when we might hear who they hire?
Not possible names, but Ron Francis. We had a media availability with him last week, which might have been the first like press conference that they've held with him since he got hired. I mean, there's been
Hmm.
some you've had access one on one, but this was the first general media availability, and that obviously was a question that came up. And he whenever he gets asked this question, he still says that they're in no rush. I think he has the green light from the ownership to hire a coach if somebody came along that they really wanted.
Hmm.
But I think they're kind of waiting a little bit to get either closer to the end of the season or even into the playoffs, maybe even after the playoffs, to get the full picture of who's available. Every year somebody gets either leaves or gets fired, or there's always some change. And I think they
Yeah,
want to know the full
full
landscape
spectrum.
before they jump on somebody. He did clarify last week that he prefers to have somebody in place who has had NHL experience as a head coach prior, but that's not 100%. If there's somebody who came along who maybe
Hmm.
didn't coach in another league or in Europe or in college or junior or the minors that they really liked, that they wouldn't hesitate to hire
Hmm.
that guy, but they would prefer somebody who has some experience. My guess is that they would like to have somebody in before the expansion draft. I think you would want to have the head
Yeah.
coach's input on who you're picking that first year. So yeah, right now it's a wait and see. But he hasn't. Ron Francis plays everything really close to the vest. It doesn't give you a
Yeah.
lot. And so there's been no real speculation on names. I mean, everybody throws out their ideas of who they think could be hired, but the team and Francis hasn't given any kind of indication who they might be looking at.
Yeah, and you kind of get any sort of a sense just from what you know of maybe what kind of coach. I mean, you've already said that they may be NHL experience, but that's not the be all end all. But what about a certain type of coach?
Well, I think Ron Francis and this team have really embraced the analytics side of hockey,
Yep.
and so I think any coach that is so entrenched in maybe some old school thinking that just dismisses that is probably out of the running. So I think you're looking at somebody who's a little more modern and at least will embrace the input from the analytics department. And they've built a really robust analytics department and a very accomplished analytics department here. It's top of the line. And so you're going to have to be open to listening to those people, and doesn't mean you have to do everything that the analytics department says. You're still the coach, but you have to at least embrace that idea. So I think you want to look at guys who have done that in the past, who have shown that they're willing to listen and take all that information in before they make decisions.
Absolutely. So, the trade deadline, Andy, is something that, in hearing a lot of general managers speak, it seemed like Seattle definitely had a lot of an impact on how they handled their business. The flat cap is something else, that wasn't necessarily true at the time that Vegas came in. But so to me, it just sets up as a very interesting situation for Seattle to come in right now, given the environment, given that we're still in a pandemic. I guess my question for you is, given all of that, do you see a path to instant success the same way that the Golden Knights did?
I've been very hesitant to talk about instant success. I think even with all the shrewd moves that Vegas made in 17, that was still kind of catching lightning in a bottle, and there were still a lot of things that went right. Yeah. So I do think that Seattle will be able to take advantage of some situations in a similar way that Vegas did. You mentioned the flat cap, but that's something that wasn't the case when Vegas came in. And the theory out there is that all those general managers, they learned their lesson about the side deals and all that. And I believe that's true to a point, but I also believe that they have the flat cap. There are side deals that are going to happen. And there are some teams, you look at like Tampa Bay. I would be shocked if a side deal isn't made there, because Tampa Bay has a lot of depth players. They have a lot of good players, and they don't have the cap for them. So there are, if they want to not lose somebody really good, they're probably going to have to talk to Ron Francis about that. So I think there are a number of teams that are in situations similar. So I think that Seattle will be able to make some deals, whether that means they get 2 players from them or they get draft picks to build up draft capital. I think you're looking at some of those same situations for Seattle. Now, whether that means they're going to be, a cup contender year one, I wouldn't say that. I still think that, to me, a realistic goal would be that they're competitive for a playoff spot in the first year. I think if they can do that, that would be a wild success for an expansion team.
Mm-hmm. In terms of a rivalry, would Vancouver be considered just because of the geography there?
That's the way that the teams have kind of, they've had some playful Twitter interactions, and some of the elected officials here and there have had some playful Twitter interactions. That's definitely how it's setting up. And, Vancouver's 2-hour drive from here. So, well, not now because there's no border crossing, but when you're allowed to cross the border, it's a 2-hour drive. And there are a lot of Canucks fans already in Seattle, just because they've been the closest NHL team for a long time. So I think the potential is there for it to be a great rivalry. I personally think that rivalries are really kind of born and sparked by playoff, matchups. And so if we can get a Canucks, Kraken playoff matchup early on, I think that'll only really help. But Seattle, in other sports has had a strong rivalry with the Bay Area. You look at the Seahawks and the 49ers, and
absolutely,
the San Jose Sharks are sitting out there. That could also end up being a big rival. I really think it'll depend on what kind of, who they meet in the playoffs the first couple of years and how those series go. Look at Vegas. Everybody assumed it would be LA, right? That would be their most hated rivals, but then they play the Sharks 2 or 3 years in a row in the playoffs. And now it's San Jose, who's their heated rival. So you never know how that's going to go. Vancouver, if it turns out being Vancouver, it would be great just by how close they are. It really does fit well. And there's a lot of commonality between the two cities. They're very similar regions, very similar, setup, the weather, everything, attitudes. It's a very similar place.
Heck, even in football, the Seahawks and the Arizona Cardinals have had their share of battles over the years too. It could always spread over. You're right. It's definitely going to come down to playoffs, and if they can especially be competitive early on, that'll obviously work to their advantage. Just got a couple more for Andy Eide here, talking Seattle Kraken, and just Ron Francis is someone he's always been known, especially in Carolina, as someone who's enjoyed really good success at the draft. I guess just what was it about Ron that stood out that made Seattle decide that he would be the right one to be the first general manager for the Kraken?
Well, it's when he first hired him, and they kudos to them for hiring him when they did. It's been 2 years now, or a year and a half now, and they could have waited. But to get a guy in and get with that kind of runway, I think was a big bonus for them. But at the time, the first thing that I thought of with Ron Francis was credibility. Right, he's a credible NHL GM. He's a
Yep.
credible NHL force, right? He's done it all. He's a Hall of Fame player. He's, won Stanley Cups. He's seen it all. He's been a player. He's been a bench coach. He's been front office guy, being a GM. So he's seen the game from every possible way you could see the game. And so I think, when they met with him, it was pretty easy choice. I think they felt lucky that he was available at the time that they were looking. And I don't think initially their plans were to hire a GM that fast, but he was available. They talked with him, they met with him, and they were afraid that he wouldn't be available if they waited. So he seems like a good fit. He's brought in a lot of good people around him, a lot of people that he's familiar with. I think a difference he's going to have here is all indications are that Seattle's not going to be a team that looks to go on the cheap. They're going to be a cap team. They're going to spend money. And that's something I don't think he had in Carolina. So it's going to be interesting to see what Ron Francis can do with a team behind him that's going to support it.
You hit my next topic. What it was the fact about ownership and how much they'd be willing to spend. So you're saying that we could see Seattle be a cap team right off the bat then?
I would think so. If not right off the bat, soon. Like they're not going to shy away from top end free agents. Look at the money they spent already on just build. They're building the stadium. It's going to be $1 billion. They're building another $70 million practice facility. They're building an arena in Palm Desert for their AHL team. They're not cutting corners anywhere here, and that's continuing. They got Todd Lewicki to come in and be the president. He was second in command at the NFL when they lured him away. It helped that his brother was involved with the Oakview group who was building the arena. But I think they're going to be a team that is not going to be afraid to sign contracts, sign free agents, and spend some money.
Absolutely. So a couple more here. So this one guy that I'm really glad that the Kraken got, just because, especially if you're a new fan out there looking to kind of connect with the team, you turn on your TV, they're going to hear John Forsland. And I just love that hire. Just what is he going to bring to the TV broadcast? Just everything that overall, what's he going to bring to the team?
I don't know if they could have asked for a better guy as their first broadcaster, right? Like he's seen it all. And it's funny when we heard Carolina let him go, a lot of us were joking around here like, oh, they should, the Kraken should hire John Forsland, thinking that that's probably a pipe dream. He's involved in NBC now, and NBC might, swoop in and take him, and he could probably pick where he goes. And then they hired him, which we all kind of were like, whoa, this is really real. And I've had a chance to talk to him, and you couldn't ask for a nicer guy. You think of his history there. He was with the Hartford Whalers. He broadcast their last game at Hartford, which is very emotional. And I recommend everybody go watch the intro to that. It's pretty spectacular how he handled that. He calls a good game. I think he does a good job. When you watched him in Carolina, he does a good job of bringing the right kind of homer. He wouldn't just be 100% go Canes, but definitely leaned that way. He does it a little differently on the national broadcast. I think he does a good job of walking that line. Yep. He's promised that with Seattle, he'll be more on the homer side a little bit. And I think Seattle fans like that. I think Seattle fans like their announcers to get more excited for their team than they do the opposing team. So, he's going to be a great voice and for anybody who's new to hockey, he's going to be a great ambassador for the Kraken on the TV broadcast.
Absolutely. And last one I got for you here is just what should we be watching for? Obviously 3 months until the expansion draft, like we've mentioned, but do we have anything that we could be watching for within a week, within a month? Like, what are you going to be looking for, Andy?
Well, right now, I think it's all about expansion drafts. The amateur drafts out there, and that's something that I really enjoy. And I know they'll be scouting the U18s next week, but there's really not a whole lot to watch there. You're not going to know where they are on that. The trade deadline was big because now the rosters are nearly set for the expansion draft. And I know that their team, Ron Francis, his analytics team and his scouts, his NHL scouts, are all, they're doing a lot of mock drafts and looking at things, but those rosters could still change. So I think right now that's what we're watching for. I don't think there's any imminent news coming as far as a head coach, but you never know. But I think right now we're watching, there's still a lot of UFAs out there who could sign before July's expansion draft. And every time that happens, it kind of changes what that team may or may not do at the expansion draft. If you re-sign a guy, you're probably re-signing him to protect him. And initial projections, you didn't even count those guys because they were, UFAs and didn't need to be protected. So that's going to, open up different scenarios for who may be available for Seattle. It also may, they may have been eyeing some of those guys. They'll get a 48-hour period before the actual expansion draft to negotiate with free agents from each team if they wish. And maybe they may have had some of those guys who've just now recently resigned targeted for that. And so that may change their plans. So it feels set, but there's still a lot that could change. And that's, I think, what we're kind of keeping an eye on now.
Yeah, and it could change in any given moment, any given signing, as we start to get what teams are thinking about more, and who they decide to let go, things like that. It's going to be a lot of fun. Fans, make sure that you follow Andy now. Got his eyes on the WHL. Is going to be all over the Kraken. At Andy Eide on Twitter. We really appreciate you taking the time to get us caught up on the Kraken, Andy.
Thanks, my pleasure. Good to talk to you guys.
Yeah, and stay tuned for part 2 of our show. We're going to have a Nashville Predators panel. We're going to try to figure out how they've been able to turn their season around, so stay tuned. Well, welcome back to part 2 of the Hockey Riders Live, Thursday, April the 22nd. Had a great talk with Andy Eide talking about the Seattle Kraken, and now we're going to transition to our panel. And joining us here are 2 of our Nashville Predators writers. We're going to try and figure out how in the world were they able to turn things around when things looked really, really bleak to now they're in a dogfight for that 4th spot. So we got 2 experts here to help us out. We got Kristy Flannery. Hello, Kristy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for joining us. And Jeffrey Middleton. Hello, Jeff.
Hi, how are you?
Doing good. Thank you. So Kristy, we'll start with you here. I guess that's the kind of the $1 million question that those who haven't really watched the Predators that close are wondering. They seem dead in the water. There are all kinds of trade rumors around the team, and now they seem like they're one of the hottest teams in the league. So why the turnaround, or can you pinpoint 1 or 2 things that's dramatically changed to help them be in this position?
There's so many factors that I think you can go back and forth with. But the first is they're getting phenomenal goaltending right now. Yep. And at the end of the day, especially going into the playoffs, it's all about when a goalie gets hot. And if they get hot at the right time, they seem to be unstoppable. And that kind of seems to be the Predators right now. Mm-hmm. And they also have a lot of depth players that are just stepping up right now.
And Jeff, what do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I got to agree there. Saros has looked phenomenal. Outside, I mean, he could be in contention for the Vezina if he didn't have a rough couple months at the beginning of the season. He's, I think, 0.002 points behind Vasilevsky for the best save percentage in the league. And I mean, he's just been unreal. And the depth players, like Kristy said, they've been great too. The herd line is something that has been coined by the broadcasts and the social media team and everybody surrounding the Predators. It's just the 4th line full of bruising guys that can control the puck. They've been excellent. And other guys like Victor Arvidsson has even stepped up, and Johansson has looked good playing with him. It's just been they've really united as one, it seems.
And Jeff, I'll start with you on this next one, because it just seemed like that every time that I looked up something Nashville, it was a new player on injured reserve, out day to day, week to week, whatever the case may be. They had so many injuries, that could partially explain what was going on before. But even with all the injuries, they're still doing really well. So you guys already cited the goaltending, but can you pinpoint some guys that maybe have stepped up in a surprising way for you, especially given the rash of injuries they've had to deal with?
Yeah, so before he got hurt too, Eli Tolvanen was unreal. He's arguably a Calder candidate. With his injury recently, he probably fell off a bit, but he was on an unreal goal-scoring streak. He was rocketing power play slap shots from the face-off dots. He was really just killing it from all angles. And then the other guys, I would say, as I just mentioned, the herd line, they've been great. That's Yakov Trenin, Colton Sissons, and before that, before he got injured, Matthew Olivier, and now Tanner Jeannot, who's come up from the AHL. They've all rocked it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, just those 4 guys, I say, were really key contributors to them coming back.
And Kristy, how are they able to overcome the injuries in your mind?
It's a team effort. I mean, he named a couple players. I can go on. Callie's been phenomenal. Arvinsson's been stepping up. And this isn't a team that they were at the bottom and one guy just put the team on his back and said, I'm just going to propel us into the playoffs. This has been a team. It's been a unit. It's been one team. It's been multiple players. And I think that's kind of what's so special and remarkable about it is they came together as a team. So I don't know if it's, they're buying into Heinz system or what it is, but they're clicking as one full unit.
And I'm sure a lot of other people out there probably thought the same thing when they were struggling and all the rumors were starting to swirl around. John Heinz's name was out there, and it seems like that, whatever he was able to do, whether the message got across or whether it's the system, it seems like that he certainly deserves a lot of credit. So, Kristy, my question for you is, how much credit does John Hines deserve for this turnaround?
I think it's funny when you look at an NHL coach, because I know that every coach is hired to get fired. And I know that fans don't really like John Hines. And of course, when the team's not doing well, John Hines should be fired. But I actually said to the guys the other day, if the Predators can turn it around and actually make the playoffs, is John Hines a candidate for the Jack Adams Trophy? His team was at the bottom of the division. They were faced with injuries to so many key players. You were out with Ellis was out, Yossi was out, Forsberg was out. And then he managed to get this team of a revolving door of rookies, and he managed to get them into the playoffs. Other coaches have been nominated for similar situations. And I feel like for Nashville, Hines is the first one to have his head on his stick. But now that they're doing well, no one's really talking about John Hines and crediting him and his coaching ability. So I find it very interesting with him.
All right, Jeff, what do you say about Coach Hines?
I've never really been a John Hines guy. I'm still not. I was not a fan of the hire at the beginning. I was willing to give him some of the benefit of the doubt, but I've never been a huge John Hines guy. But I will say he does deserve credit for what he's done, the way that he's been able to involve all of these new players and make the transition from Chicago and the AHL seamless, essentially. It's just been really, really fun to watch. And I feel like one of the interesting parts of what he's done is players they look like they're buying in, but it also feels like they're getting away from the Laviolette system. It feels like before the injuries happened that they were all kind of stuck in this mindset of shoot shots from the point, low danger, and they're still getting some of that, but their neutral zone play looks much improved. They're just a more electric team to watch, and I think John Hines does deserve credit for that because he's gotten them to buy in.
Well, Jeff, will stay with you as we are recording this now. We're actually recording it on Wednesday night, even though you're probably watching this on Thursday. The Blackhawks are playing the Nashville Predators, and for the most part, the Predators have had their way. So my question for you is, especially fighting for that fourth position, what have the Predators been able to do to get the upper hand on the Blackhawks for the most part this season?
I think it's a mix of things. UC Saros, the last game or 2 games ago, my apologies, they played, he was outstanding. He saved like 42 shots or something crazy like that. And I think that's kind of been the story most of the season, even just outside of the Blackhawks. But they've been able to, I think, take advantage of Kevin Lankinen, who before this was on an absolutely incredible tear. He pushed the Blackhawks to where they are now. Yep. He unreal for arguably the first half of the season. I think they've been able to take advantage of him on his downturn, and even the Blackhawks young guys and their depleted D-core. I noticed a couple games ago that every time Calvin DeHaan was on the ice, I know he's not the greatest, and it happens against not just the Predators, but they really took advantage of him. And as I've gotten to watch them, I've noticed that they took advantage of the weaker links, and I think that's something that John Hines has put in to the system, and I think that's something that he deserves credit for as well.
All right, Kristy, what do you say?
I just think it comes down to Chicago's offense can't get past Nashville's defense. And we all know defense wins championships. And I just think that right now, the Chicago, I mean, I think every game Chicago hasn't scored more than, I think, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, 2 goals is usually what they can't get over. They can't even score 3 goals. And I think a lot of it has to do with they can't figure out the defense. You know, they can't open up a lane. They can't get a good shot off. And I think that's really, to simplify it, I think that's what it is.
And on paper, right, you know, the Predators would seem like they have the advantage up and down the roster for the most part, considering where the Blackhawks are kind of in their process, where the Nashville Predators are. And that's the thing that has kind of befuddled me, where you see the talent there. Ryan Johansson, when he's right, is a good center. Matt Duchene, when he's going right, he's a really good center. Philippe Forsberg is one of the best snipers in the National Hockey League. So there's clear talent there. But the thing, you know, they figured it out recently, but up until that point is the consistency. So, Kristy, my question for you is, do you feel confident that they figured out the consistency that they need to enjoy success?
That's a really good question. You know, I think that for them, I think everything kind of goes on the goaltender. I think if the goaltender can be consistent, I think the team in front of him will be consistent. But I think if Saros kind of falls off or kind of loses it a little bit, I kind of think the team's going to follow suit.
Jeff, what do you say?
Yeah, just to back off that, I think that's exactly what it is. I think if Saros is hot, the team is hot. And that worries me, to be honest, because goalies are unpredictable. They're the most volatile position in the entire sport. It doesn't make me feel very confident that they can play like this all the time when they're relying on UC Saros to get the job done night in and night out. And their record against the top 3 teams in the Central is abysmal. I think they've won they're 4-15-1 or something along those lines. So I think if UC Saros can stay hot, maybe they can pull a game out, or maybe 2 against Tampa. But if Tampa makes the top spot in the Central, but with Carolina there, I'm just not very confident that they can get past them. Carolina's had their number all year. I like what I'm seeing right now, but you got to put it into perspective a little bit.
So Kristy, Flannery and Jeff Middleton are Predators writers joining us here on the panel on the Hockey Writers Live. And Jeff, let's talk about Saros a little bit more in depth, because it's been documented here already in our conversation that he had a very slow start to the year, but now he's on fire. And you cited that his save percentage is right behind Vasilevsky's. Like, it's been really, really good. What flipped for him? Was there something? Was it just confidence? Was it just better play in front of him? Like, can you cite 1 or 2 reasons that the switch flipped for Saros?
Saros is really interesting. I wrote a piece about him earlier this year. He has this tendency to struggle at the beginning of seasons, whether that's in the first month or the second month. Even when he was a backup with Rene starting, he always had these weird droughts of just not very good games for a month, and then he would absolutely explode for the rest of the year. And I found that kind of interesting. And I think that is one thing. I don't know if he's ever going to be able to figure that out, but it's a really weird trend that he has. I also think that, yes, the defense has gotten better in front of him. John Hines' system is really reliant on preventing high danger chances, but also that sacrifices the high danger chances at the other end. So I think it's a mix of Saros gained some confidence. He got out of the first 2 months of the season not unscathed, but not very good, I guess. It wasn't like anything painful enough to deter his stats from the top.
Right.
But he's been really good. He does look more confident. His lateral movement looks great. He's squaring up to shooters. He's just everywhere. He's been unreal. And I think that, it has to do with the defense in front of him and his confidence outside of the first 2 months.
Yeah, and I'll just add the point that one of the smaller goaltenders in the league too, and very positionally sound, and just think he does a phenomenal job. He's had great success against the Blackhawks in Columbus. You mentioned the 4-15-1 or whatever it is against the top. I think he's maybe only lost once or twice all year against the Blackhawks and the Blue Jackets combined. So Yeah, it definitely brings a lot to the table. Kristy, what do you say? Like, where did it change for him in your mind?
He came back from injury and just something switched. And I think it's really hard, especially for goaltenders, to kind of pinpoint if it was more of a mental thing or if there was, leading up to that injury, if there was something hindering him and now he's at 100%. I know that the last game they played, his team blocked 16 shots in front of him. And I think the sweet spot for the Predators to be successful is, even if Saros is starting to look shaky, you need to start blocking shots in front of him. You need to limit those chances in front of him. And I think that's kind of the sweet spot to balance out the inconsistency that Saros has had throughout his entire career.
Well said. Now let's stick with you on this one, because if there's one other team that is going to be right there fighting for this playoff spot, it's the Dallas Stars. And
which is fascinating.
It's going to be a great spot. And circle the date, May 1st, Bridgestone Arena. That's an 8:00 Eastern start. It's Stars at Predators. It's the 8th meeting of the year between those two teams. That could go a long way in determining how this goes. But my question for you both, we'll start with Kristy. What do the Predators need to do to hold off the Stars?
So I think what's really fascinating about the Stars, and I think I even said a few weeks ago that it's the Stars that kind of scare me, that can climb up the standings. What kind of concerns me looking at Nashville is the last 2 games of Nashville's schedule is 2 games against Carolina. The last two games for Dallas are 2 matchups against Chicago. So for me, that last matchup between Dallas and Nashville, it's crucial for Nashville to get those 2 points because they don't have success against Carolina. And when you look at Dallas's record for the season with Chicago, it's 2 wins, 2 losses, and 2 overtime losses. So that's kind of that can go any which way. Whereas we know Nashville cannot figure out Carolina. So that game is crucial for Nashville to win in Bridgestone against Dallas. They need those 2 points.
And then the 2 games after that Dallas game are at Columbus. And you know that hasn't been good for them, haven't won in a couple weeks. They're playing a lot of minor leaguers, etc. The team is selling. Well, Columbus earlier in the year beat Nashville in Columbus, so they can't look past the obvious if they want to try to finish the deal. So Jeff, what do you say about the whole Dallas-Nashville component to this?
Yeah, I mean, that game is uber important for the Predators and their playoff hopes. I mean, my suggestion would be take them to overtime. Like, that's the best case scenario because Dallas has struggled against Nashville past 60 minutes. Obviously, you don't want Dallas to get a point, but if that's what has to happen, then so be it. As long as the Predators come out with 2 points that game, then that's all that really matters. But I think you have to figure out if Anton Khudobin's playing, I wouldn't be as worried. If Jake Ottinger is, I would be a little bit worried just because I don't think they've seen him as much as Khudobin this season. Stopping Roope Hintz and Jason Robertson is going to be a big thing for the Preds. They've both been unreal this year. They've been super fun to watch, and obviously Jamie Benn is always a threat. So yeah, I think stopping those 3 guys along with Heiskanen and Klingberg, and if it has to happen, taking them past 60 minutes.
I just got a couple more for you guys here, and Jeff, we'll start with you. So coming down the stretch here, we know the importance of the games. We know what they have to do. But if I'm a Predators fan, what is the biggest thing that I should be worried about in these last few games in order to make the playoffs? Like, you look up and down the team, all the different tendencies, all the things that are going on. What worries you the most about the Predators?
So 2 things. I would be worried about the games against teams outside or teams inside of the top 3, Florida, Carolina, Tampa Bay. I would be worried about games against those 3.
Okay.
I would also be worried about UC Saros for whatever reason dropping off, even just a slight bit, because if he doesn't maintain this kind of play, it could be detrimental to the Preds and their playoff hopes. Kevin Lankinen has shown that he can play really well. Anton Khudobin took his team to the Stanley Cup final last year. So those 3 goalies getting hot along with their offenses, I think it's really a lot closer than it might seem in terms of like just looking at the points in the standings. But yeah, I would say UC Saros falling off and the last few games against the top 3 teams in the Central.
And it's 2 against Florida and 2 against Carolina in the last stretch for Nashville, in case you were wondering. So, Kristy, what are you most worried about with the Predators coming down the stretch?
I would agree on Saros. That would be my main concern, is just to see if he can keep his play elevated, especially at this time of year where you have to fight to get into the playoffs. And then once you're in the playoffs, you have to obviously fight, because it's not going to be easy. If they make it in, it's going to be very difficult for them to win a first round. And the second thing would probably just be any more injuries. Like, I would just be worried that if Yossi went down again, Ellis or any of those players. So those would be my 2 big concerns.
Okay. Got one last question for both of you. We're going to put both of you on the spot. Kristy, we're going to start with you here. At the end of the day, all the games are played. Will the Nashville Predators make the playoffs as the 4th seed in the Discover Central Division? So that's part 1, yes or no, and then why or why not?
I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
Because I'm a dreamer.
Okay.
And I'm going to say yes, because right now, along with Colorado, they're a hot team. And as long as it's not like a short-term thing, they're getting hot at the right time. So I'm going to say yes.
You say yes. Okay, Jeff, yes or no, and why or why not?
That's a really tough one. I have the urge, like my conscience is telling me Dallas, but I think I'm going to go that they will make the playoffs. And I think the reason they will is because I don't see UC Saros dropping off as soon as tomorrow or anytime before the playoffs. I think he's really going to play consistently well. I think he can beat Dallas. I think he can beat Florida. He's been able to beat Florida this year. He had 2 really stellar performances against them. And I think with Philip Forsberg hopefully returning soon and a couple other guys, I think they can squeak their way into the playoffs.
I'm going to say Nashville as well, but here's the reason why. Just to give if you're a Predators fan watching this, I'm going to tell you the Dallas schedule moving forward here. Okay. Mm-hmm. So they have the 2 games against Detroit at Little Caesars Arena. Okay. You probably wins, but Detroit's been playing better, so you don't want to assume there. But then listen to this: Carolina, Tampa, Nashville, Florida, Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
That is a very hard schedule against the top 3, and then possibly the 4th there with Nashville, because they're fighting for position. They're all right there. They all have something to play for. If there's anything that they want to finish at the top of that division, because the other 2 have to play each other in the first round. So it's kind of like, would you rather play Nashville or would you rather play Carolina, Florida, Tampa? That hard one to say there, but I think the schedule does ultimately favor Nashville, because Dallas has also had to play a lot of games too, because remember with COVID at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, they're playing more games.
They play a lot more games. Can they hold on to it? I mean, they certainly have the team to do it, but boy, if you're asking me one or the other, I think Nashville does have the upper hand. They've proven with their play, with Saros, with everyone else, that they certainly deserve to be in this conversation. I think they ultimately do finish it off. So great show today. Kristy, Jeff, thank you both so very much for joining in on the Hockey Writers Live talking Nashville Predators with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Me.
And fans, make sure you follow both of them. They do a really phenomenal job with our site. Great writers with us. And along with everybody here, we have so many writers, over 100 on our staff here. Always got stuff coming. So whether your team's in the playoffs, or if they're like mine, like you cover the Columbus Blue Jackets, they're not. We always got something going on. We got that draft guide out there. We got news and analysis going out there. And we have all kinds of shows here on our platform. So make sure you hit that like button on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube. You will not miss any of our interviews. We really appreciate Kristy and Jeff joining us. We had Andy Eide from who covers the Seattle Kraken, who joined us. Really appreciate their time. We'll be back at this time next week. Hope you all have a very good week. Stay healthy, be safe. We'll see you next time here on the Hockey Writers Live.